Okay, so for this video, I'm doing solving square root equations. And for these, there's 3 steps. You have to isolate the radical, square both sides, solve the equation, and you have to make sure you check your answer. And if you don't check it, you can very easily get the question wrong, and it messes up the whole thing, and you just get the whole thing wrong. So you really need to make sure to check it. Okay, so the first problem we're going to do is pretty much the easiest one we're going to do. So again, your first step is to isolate the radical. So you want to subtract the 4 from both sides, and then you have square root of 2 equals 7 minus 4 is 3. Oh, that's ugly. Okay, there we go. And then you want to square both sides, like we said in our second step. And so because you're square rooting it, once you square it, it's just going to cancel it out. So this is going to be x plus 2 equals, and then 3 squared is 9. And then you want to just subtract the 2, like a regular equation, and then you get x equals 7. I just like to underline it. And you're going to think, oh yeah, we're done, yay. No, you have to check your answer. So you write off to the side, you just have to plug it back in. It's really easy. 7 plus 2, and then plus 4 equals 7. 7 plus 2 is 9, and then square root of 9 is 3, and then 7 equals 7. So for this one, it was right. So if you were lazy and didn't check your answer, you would have been fine, but that's not always going to happen, so you have to check your answer. Okay, so this next one is a little bit more challenging. It's not too difficult, but it's just a little bit more work, I guess. So following our steps, you would isolate the radical, but you only need one radical isolated, if that makes sense. And this one's already isolated, so you can go ahead and go on to the next step, which is to square both sides. And so if you square this side, it's going to be just x plus 15, because again, it just cancels out. The square root sign cancels out. And for this side, when you square it, you're not just distributing the exponent. That's not going to give you a correct answer. You have to actually FOIL it, which I know is annoying, but you have to do it. So when you FOIL it, 5 times 5 is 25. And then 5 times the root of x is 5x, and it's 5 root x, and it's positive 5 because there's no negative sign in front of here. And then root x times 5 is also positive 5 root x. And then root x times root x is going to be x because, again, it cancels, it's squaring it, so it's canceling out the square root. So that's just going to be plus x. And then you're just going to want to solve it the same way you would solve any other equation. So I'm going to subtract my x first from both sides. Sorry, I'm kind of covering it. And that actually just cancels it out from both sides. So that's kind of nice. And then you have 15 on this side equals 25. And I'm just going to go ahead and combine my like terms on this side. So these two root x's combine, and you can only combine them if there's the same thing under the square root. So these two combine into positive 10 root x, and then you just want to subtract the 25 from both sides, and you're going to get negative 10 equals 10 root x, and then you want to divide by 10 because you want to continue to isolate x. And you're going to have negative 1 equals root x. And then you want to square both sides to get rid of that radical, or square root sign, whatever you want to call it. Negative 1 squared is 1. And then root of x squared is just x. So now you found x. Well, maybe you have. I don't really know yet. So then you come over here and you check it. So 1 plus 15 equals 5 plus root of 1. So 1 plus 15 is 16, and the square root of 16 is 4, and root of 1 is 1, so 5 plus 1 is 6, and 4 does not equal 6, so this one is actually no solution. So if you didn't check this one, you would have gotten the problem wrong, and that would have counted off points. If it was a test, that would not have been good. So you have to check your answers. So this problem is a little bit different. As you can see, it's an inequality rather than a regular equation. So the steps are a little bit different. So you have to identify the x values that make a non-negative answer, and I'll show you how to do that in a second. And then you just solve it the same way as a regular square root equation. So you would isolate the radical, square both sides, solve, and then you also still have to check your answer. Very important. Okay, so to identify the x values that make a non-negative answer, what you're going to want to do is, I like to do this off to the side kind of. You're going to want to write what's under your radical, that's 5x minus 10, and then you're going to want to make it greater than or equal to 0. And the reason you make it greater than or equal to 0 is because you can't have a negative number under your square root sign, because you can't square root a negative without having imaginary numbers. And we don't want imaginary numbers because we can't graph them. So you want to, everything that's greater than or equal to 0 is going to be positive or not negative. So because 0 isn't positive or negative, so you're just going to want to solve it like a regular inequality. So you're going to add 10, and then you have the 5x, and your sign doesn't flip. And then you have divided by 5 to isolate the x. Again, the sign doesn't flip because you're not dividing by negative 5. You're dividing by positive 5. So your first little x value is going to be 2. And this is kind of off to the side. We'll come back to this in a second once we solve this equation. So I'm going to rewrite it because I don't really have room to do it where I originally wrote it. So once I do that, I'm going to follow the same steps as before. So I'm going to isolate my radical. And then you have square root of 5x minus 10 is less than or equal to 5, because 8 minus 3 is 5. So then you're going to square both sides, and you have 5x minus 10 is less than or equal to 25. And then you add 10 to both sides. And then you have 5x is less than or equal to 25 plus 10, which is 35. And then you divide by 5. And x is going to be less than or equal to 7. So the next thing you're going to want to do is, you can't check your answer because you don't have like a definitive answer because there's not like an equal sign. So you have to draw a number line. And you're going to want to put little lines on it for 2 and 7. So for 2, x is going to be greater than or equal to 2. And because there's this little line under it and it's going to be greater than or equal to, you can make a little solid dot. And same for 7. So x is going to be less than or equal to 7. So a solid dot and then a line going this way. So your answers are going to be between here and here. So to check it, you can plug in anything that is 2 or 7 and anything in between. So I like to use the smallest number possible. I don't know, it just makes it easier. So 3 plus 5 times 2 minus 10 is less than 8. So 5 times 2 is 10. Minus 10 is going to be 0. So 3 plus root of 0, that's just 0. So I'm just going to go ahead and cross this out because root of 0 is just 0 and 3 plus 0 is just 3. So then you have 3 is less than or equal to 8, which checks out. So your final answer is going to be bracket 2, comma 7 bracket, because your answer is going to be anything that includes 2 and includes 7 and anything in between. So if you want to go ahead and box that, that's your answer.